Welcome everybody to another of my special Patreon readings. Sorry, I've been a little late lately getting these things posted, mostly because I've been working really hard on a couple different things. I've got a small novella out there that I have been working on pretty diligently to try and get that out. Might be kind of fun to read that one for you all too, but I have a publisher who's interested in it, and if it's a publisher who's interested, I can't really do that quite yet, but you guys will get a look at it, I promise. Also, I'm working on a short story that actually I'm putting together for my the Horror Writers Association, of which I'm involved. We're putting together an anthology, and so we are accepting submissions for short stories. Working on that right now. So I'm going to read Riapoke to you. I'm going to try and get as far in this as I can in about a 20-minute video, and then who knows, maybe I'll get close to the end. All right, anyway, enough babbling incessantly, because that's not why you're here. You're here to listen to me read. All right. Chapter 21, Cry Havoc. And here is another thing, Reverend. When Matthew pulled up to the intercom station to be let in, I looked at the monitor and I'd swear I saw 3 people in the truck. I even asked that government man about him. He gave me some story about him being sick. I didn't think about it until after they left, but only 2 people drove out of here. George finished the report and awaited further instructions. I thought the security monitor was broken. George smiled. We got it partially working. It's taking stills every 5 seconds. Need to get a guy out here to look at it. Donnie smiled and nodded at his head of security. Thank you, George. You've shown me great loyalty today. The master will be appreciative of your service. I need you to summon the committee to the church. Make sure everyone parks on the other side of the building. I don't want anyone to know that you're there. Listen to me carefully, George. Matthew has turned on us. He's planning to disrupt the ceremony tonight. I want Matthew and the boy brought to me, unharmed. Take whatever actions you think are necessary. I'm relying on you to stop him. Bring them to me, alive if you can, dead if you must. Do I make myself clear? George nodded. Should Matthew and the other two return, they weren't to leave the property alive. Donnie hoped the plan worked a little more smoothly than it had thus far. Unfortunately, he'd misjudged who played the part of the betrayer. He thought the problem solved with Wayland dead. The situation wasn't all bad. Now he had something additional to lord over Matthew. That little rat of a conservation officer would now die for his transgressions. Matthew once had his complete confidence. That was until someone called to confirm the receipt of a body for an autopsy in a county morgue in West Virginia. Due to a difficult-to-read phone number, Donnie received the phone call through the town switchboard. It was too late to stop the report from being transmitted, and he thought it better to let it go through. It signaled the beginning of the end for Matthew. At first, Matthew's gall in exhuming a body and sending it out of state infuriated him. The master theorized that Matthew should be brought closer rather than drive him away, adhering to the age-old wisdom of keeping your friends close and your enemies closer. They made Matthew a deacon in the church, and it gave Donnie almost unfettered control of him. As soon as the committee had finished preparations at the church, George was to join the other members of the committee. The plan was simple. He wanted Matthew and the boy alive. The other man was to be used as feed for the master. Once they were inside of the cave, it became a tomb unless he died in a hail of gunfire. Breathlessly, Elizabeth tumbled through the door, panting as she ran up to her father. He scowled at his daughter. What's the fire, Pumpkin? Dad, I saw him, she gasped. Who'd you see? Kyle, with Matthew, and another guy. She said very matter-of-factly. They were all in Matthew's truck together. You said you wanted me to keep an eye out for Kyle, and I saw him. Did I do all right, Daddy? He gave her a paternal grin and pushed a lock of blonde hair out of her face. You did excellent, baby girl. Unfortunately, you're a little late. George already saw them in the truck. She pushed out her bottom lip in a pout. Aw, I wanted to find him. You did well, and I'm glad you kept your eyes open. Right now, George is getting things set up for the ceremony tonight. Ooh, can I come, Daddy? Please, I'd like to help out if I can. Really? He smiled at her. For years he'd worked to desensitize her to the idea of killing. It was the master's plan that someday she would take over as high priestess of the church. Starting with small animals, he's managed to work his way up to where she observed whole ceremonies. The master seemed to enjoy how she watched the proceedings. However, over the years and the introduction of hormones, she took on a darker bend. Tonight, for safety's sake, he preferred to keep her out of the cave. If something were to go wrong, he didn't want her in harm's way. Until Matthew and the others were bound to the iron rings in the master's lair, he wanted Elizabeth nowhere near them. Nowhere near them. Donnie shook his head at her. Sorry, sweetie. You have to sit this one out. We don't have everything set, and I don't want you in any danger. He thought back to her first ceremony. She watched intently, never blinking at the violence. She drank it all in. And this is how you make a serial killer, Donnie thought to himself. Matthew unlocked the church door with a dull thud. Along with George's suspicions, Elizabeth's sighting of Kyle would certainly raise an alarm. Time was a luxury they didn't have. Behind the altar, a cave opening sat below the floor where the master resided. However, the opening was inaccessible to most people. The Reverend normally interacted with him by entering through the heavy steel door in the back of the office. Down a long passageway, there were a row of cells and storage caves, allowing the Reverend to keep people prisoner when the need arose. In sharp contrast to the police department jail cells, this was the real prison of the town. Or rather, it was Rhea Polk's version of death row. The foyer of the church opened onto a huge sanctuary. The center of the floor was made of a polished marble, and it had several slabs of brass-encrusted symbols which marked the final resting place of prominent Powhatan leaders. Although the church maintained that these were the real grave sites, Matthew doubted it, since the subfloor was suspended several feet over solid bedrock. Two large central staircases, one on each side, led up in either direction to a balcony overlooking the sanctuary. A register of pipes towered over the altar area. A small elevated platform, dwarfed by the sanctuary, held the organ console. It was connected by stairs to a large choir loft. Though he'd lost faith in the master years ago, the grandeur of the church still filled Matthew with reverent awe. Where do we look? Kyle broke the silence, anxious to begin the search. We need to get into the Reverend's office, Matthew replied. The door to the left of the altar leads to it. Inside there we'll find another door taking us underground. A large cave is used to hold those waiting as tributes to the master. Your mother is likely being held down there. Walking toward the office, they were suddenly stopped by loud voices outside the church. The voices sounded male. They were trying to be quiet and failing miserably. One person kept admonishing the others to keep it down. Mike peeked out a small opening in the drapes, exclaiming, "Guys, we have company, and not a lot of time. Looks like 5 men coming this way." Matthew grabbed Kyle by the arm. "Come quickly." The trio ran across the sanctuary. Matthew hastily pushed them toward the altar and through a small door behind the pews. The opening provided access to the space under the floor and the infrastructure supporting the sound system. Few people even knew it was there, and no one had been down there in years. Matthew, wanting to stay in a position to cover them if the hiding place was discovered, took shelter inside a small closet filled with robes and extra chairs. The door to the church opened and closed with a metallic scrape. Sounds of heavy boots echoed through the sanctuary. Matthew held his breath as they drew near. A deep baritone voice rang out through the open space. "Well, now, isn't this nice? All of us together in the Holy of Holies, our little sanctuary away from the rest of the world. Come on out, Matthew. I know you're here somewhere. Who knows? If you give yourself up, we might go easy on you. The master might only take your badge and not your life. What do you say?" Matthew prayed Mike and Kyle would crawl as deep into the subfloor as they could. Accessing the space a few times over the years, he'd never explored it fully. Mike and Kyle weren't large men, and they could make it quite a distance under the building before they'd run out of space. He backed away from the doors of the closet, hoping to find a better position to hide in case someone decided to check his hiding place. He considered hiding within the folds of the thick robes hanging in the closet when his foot stepped on a fluorescent bulb someone carelessly left on the floor. The bulb shattered with a loud pop. The noise rang out like a bell in Matthew's head. There was no way the others could have missed it. Oh, crap. The baritone voice growled again. Well, now, what do we have here? Something's hiding in the closet, fellas. Let's have a look. Matthew knew he was caught. He only hoped Matthew and Kyle found somewhere to hide. Drawing out his pistol, he waited for an opportune moment. Inside the crawlspace, Mike and Kyle heard a sudden gunshot and then a scuffle. He could only assume it was Matthew and the men. A sudden scream of pain and then ominous quiet weighed heavy over their shoulders. Mike wished there was something he could do to help Matthew, but right now his responsibility was to protect the boy. They slithered down the natural curve of the rocky surface. The farther they got from the entrance to the crawl space, the less dusty the air became. The rock changed from dry and warm to cool and wet. The light should have faded as they crawled deeper into the hiding place, and it did for a time. Then a light source in front of them took over, dimly at first, and then a thin veil of light cascaded from an unknown source, reflecting off the polished surface of the rock. Kyle tapped Mike on the shoulder and motioned that they should go toward the light. The light seeped up from a hole in the floor only a few feet in front of them. It was enough to illuminate the rocky floor and the underside of the building's superstructure. Peering down the hole, the light source became apparent. Fire blazed forth from the rocks, generating an eerie but welcome glow given the impenetrable darkness they sat in. The hole, large enough for them to fit through, led down to a stairway hewn out of the bedrock itself. They were at least 7 feet up and landing on solid rock. With a landing on solid rock, it might be possible to jump down without serious injury if they were careful. Mike hung his head down the hole and stared up at the hallway. Kyle urged Mike to look in the direction he had been looking, and Mike saw what the boy spied. A door, the bottom of which was only partially lit by the firelight, offered the possibility of escape. The sight provided an enticing reward for their efforts. Mike silently indicated his intention to jump down, and then Kyle could follow. Mike dangled his legs over the hole and began lowering himself down as far as possible. If he closed some of the distance before letting himself fall, it would minimize the likelihood of suffering a broken or sprained ankle. Most importantly, it might minimize the noise. As he hung from the rock, anyone walking down the stairs would not miss a pair of legs dangling down. As if fate dealt them a crushing blow, the door in the hallway issued a grating metallic strike of a deadbolt retracting from an old door frame. A man's voice rang out. All the way down. The door opened slowly, and the shuffling of feet echoed across the cavern. As people entered, "You gentlemen have rendered a fine service to the master. He will be grateful." "Keep moving, you traitor," a different voice added to the gruff chorus. Mike's eyes grew as large as dinner plates. This was the point of no return. He'd have to climb back up without making any noise. Kyle reached for his hand and pulled. For a moment, nothing happened as Mike hung precariously in between the hole in the bedrock and the rock stairs below. With a tug, Kyle pulled Mike back up to the top. Surprised by the boy's strength, Mike's legs disappeared over the top of the cavern lip before anyone had a chance to see either of them. Scooting over to the side, Mike cast a look of appreciation to Kyle. Peering down at the floor, Mike noticed with horror the phony identification tag they had made as part of his uniform had fallen off while Kyle pulled him back up. All it would take is for one of the men to notice the identification card, and they would know something was wrong. As the shuffling of the men's feet echoed down the stairs, Donnie's voice boomed through the hallway. "Now, boys, don't rough him up too bad. I want him in good shape tonight for the ceremony. You know, Matthew, if anyone had told me that you were the one who betrayed us, I'd have thought that they were mad. I have to admit, when I discovered you'd sent that corpse out of state, I was more than a little impressed. You managed it right from under my nose." "Fuck you," Matthew hissed. Now, Matthew, you're in the house of the master. Show respect. After all, as far as we know, no one has decided your fate. Why don't you just tell me where the boy is, and I'll go a little easier on you. He's not at the jail, so I can only conclude you stashed him somewhere." As they dragged Matthew under the hole in the ceiling, he glanced up. For a moment, Matthew and Kyle's eyes met. The look must have lingered a little too long because one of the men raised their head to see what had drawn Matthew's attention. Thinking fast, Matthew yanked his arm from under the man and sucker punched him in the gut. "Oh, you have some fight left in you, huh?" another goon standing by said. The man punched Matthew in the ribs with a pair of brass knuckles. As he did, something fell from the captor's belt and skittered into the cell opposite the hole in the ceiling. In the firelight, Kyle and Mike could see it was Matthew's gun. They must have taken it during the scuffle upstairs. None of the men noticed it fell during the present scuffle. Mike could only look down, helpless to act. Matthew was taking considerable beating on their behalf. The look of pain on Matthew's face was intolerable. However, his act distracted the man and avoided a possible disaster. Matthew spit a mouthful of blood out onto the floor of the stairs and the wall. For now, they would just have to watch and listen from their overhead perch. "Donnie," Matthew's voice gurgling with blood, suddenly spoke. "Wait, Donnie, listen. You have something to say, my dear Officer Tanner." Donnie turned on his heels and looked at the bleeding man. "Yeah, your men hit like fucking girls." Matthew suddenly burst out laughing. No, I take that back. Girl Scouts could hit harder than that." Donnie's face turned red. "Take him to the master's lair and make sure the ropes are good and tight." He leaned in close. "Let's see how much humor you have left in you after the master has removed your spleen." The group walked past the opening in the ceiling and down the passageway, disappearing from sight. Mike heard the opening of what sounded like another large metal door. A few moments later, Matthew's piercing, agonizing scream echoed down the corridor. Chapter 22 is not very long, so we're going to read this one too. Prisoner in Hell. Megan was exhausted. The combination of humidity and the lack of anywhere to sit played on her psyche. She remembered seeing an old television show detailing a popular Soviet torture technique which involved never letting someone completely sit or stand. The victim was forced into holding an uncomfortable position in a room too small to stand up and a floor covered in spikes, so they couldn't sit down. Although the cell had no spikes, finding a place to sit or sleep comfortably proved elusive. She ate what little food the Reverend brought to her. Not tasty, but it was still something to eat, and it would help keep her strength up. This could be the deciding factor if an opportunity for escape presented itself. The cave-turned prison cell lacked any creature comforts. In the corner, a few old crates were stacked up against the wall. She'd searched them thoroughly, finding only a few rusty nails and a long metal hinge loosely securing the top of one of the boxes. It could be fashioned into a weapon. Rocks lay scattered on the floor near the wall, but none were large enough to be useful. Several rags lay strewn on the floor, and not much else. There were a few smaller openings in the wall, much too small for her frame to fit. Given enough time, a large hole might be chipped out to slip through. However, she was sure she didn't have that kind of time. In the distance, the door opened with a quick shriek. Based on the sounds, it was a group of men. A scuffle broke out, leaving one of the men to let out a terrible groan. Megan spied up the hallway to see Donnie walking in front of 4 men, dragging another man. The badly beaten man's clothing, torn and bloodstained, was still recognizable as a uniform. It was the conservation officer who had arrested them the day before at the boat landing. She yelled out to Donnie, "What the hell are you doing to him?" He stopped and turned toward her and stared through the bars. "The better question is, when are you going to be doing something, or when we are going to be doing something similar to you? Your time is just about run out. After I'm done with him, then it will be time for you to join us in the Master's lair." He continued, "Oh, and by the way, you'll be happy to know that brat of a son of yours and another guy know you're here. But don't worry, they'll be joining you shortly. My man on the outside didn't give me a name, but someone came over from the resort." Donnie smirked at her. A wave of fire and emotion welled up inside of Megan. She drilled Donnie with a piercing gaze that made him take a few steps back. "You leave Kyle alone." She clutched the bars, her knuckles turning white. Mess with him, and I swear by all that's holy that you'll never find a hole deep enough to hide in, no rock large enough to hide behind, and no island remote enough to escape me. He's my entire world, and hell hath no fury like a mother protecting her children. Donnie regained his composure. My dear Megan, it's sad to see you reduced to cliches. This isn't a Hollywood movie, you know. Look around you. There's nothing you can do. I had a plan for your boy. My own daughter kind of messed it up. What are you going to do? Kids, you know. If you'll forgive a cliche of my own. All right. Now your son will be joining you as a feast of sorts. I won't tell you who the main course is. That'd spoil the surprise. You're sick, you know that. I'm sick. Oh, dear woman, that makes me laugh. Outside our little town, people are slaughtered in the streets. Do you know that only a handful of the major metropolitan areas in the country account for almost all the murders which take place annually? Did you know that? Parents abandon their kids so that they can go out and get wasted on recreational drugs. The honest people have to work 2, sometimes 3 jobs just to make ends meet. And those buffoons in Washington keep making matters worse by their own greed, idolatry, and stupidity. During the last presidential election, one candidate should have been in prison, and the other is an egotistical womanizer. And you think I'm sick? Just because I found a way to keep my people safe from the outside world, you have no idea how hard it is, do you? The world would judge these people by laws invented by men. In the outside world, our way of life would get us all thrown in prison because they simply don't understand what we're trying to build. The world wants what we already have, our security, and they'll destroy anyone who challenges the existing authorities. Megan couldn't believe this lunatic had the nerve to rant at her, talking down to her in a sermon of sorts. How dare he lecture her? You murder people for your so-called security. A few people who violate our laws are punished, that is true. It is all for the master, a real God. We owe it to him. You know what happens to those who break our rules, Megan? Although you didn't do it intentionally, you broke our laws the moment you set foot on our dock. You and your son aren't supposed to be here. I can't make exceptions to the rules now, can I? Let us go. We promise we'll leave and never return. Donnie let out a giant belly laugh. Thank you, Mrs. Johnston. I haven't laughed that hard in a long time. You must take me for stupid or insane. I assure you I'm neither of those things. Now, how do you think this plays out? You go back to the resort, who of course didn't even notice the missing boat or your sudden disappearance for a few days. Then you just pack your things and head home? No, I don't see any of that scenario likely to play out. How about this scenario? You'd show up at the resort and immediately call the police. You tell them our story, and then I have FBI agents all over my town, poking into the affairs of the good people of Rehoboth. Which one of those scenarios do you think is more likely? He raised his hands like a balance comparing 2 weights. I can't let that happen. No. I like things just the way they are. We already have a bit of a mess with this other guy showing up with Kyle. Who is he anyway? Megan searched her memories of the past few days. She tried to remember anyone who might be enticed to come to her aid. They may have called the police when she and Kyle vanished with the boat. The police wouldn't just show up with one officer and her son, though. The only other person who knew anything about her was Mike, and they'd only just met. I have no idea. Mike leaned toward the bar. Don't you dare lie to me. I can make all of this easy or hard. It's up to you. Now tell me, who the hell is the other guy with Kyle? I tell you, I don't know. Donnie lurched forward and tried to grab Megan by the shirt as she ducked out of the way. Tell me, he howled. I have no idea. It was Kyle and me, but I will tell you this. I hope he guts you like a fish. He stepped back, smoothing out his shirt. I have to give you credit. Your fictionalized view of the world is making my day entertaining. However, you're in no position to make any kind of insinuation about whom will be gutting who. Or is it whom? I can never remember. Donnie backed away from the bars. Okay, he continued. I'm not that concerned. Not sure I even care. It's only a matter of time before we have everything wrapped up. Toward the end of the stairway, the 4 men who brought Matthew down stepped through the door to the cave and moved to lock it. Don't lock the door, gentlemen. We'll be back soon enough. One of the men handed a large key ring to Donnie. Well, Mrs. Johnson, I guess I'll be seeing you again later. I'm just waiting for a couple of other people to fall into my little web. Till then, I bid you adieu. Megan heard the men trudge up the stairs, followed by the telltale sign of the metal door opening and closing. As soon as the metal lock fell into place, she sprinted to the corner of the room to the forgotten boxes. There were two things that the Reverend said which stuck in her mind. Kyle somehow brought someone from the resort. It was likely this person was made aware of the situation. The second thing Donnie said is that he'd be back soon, and if that was the case, something to defend herself might come in handy. A few swift kicks to the mostly dry, rotten boxes reduced them to a few splintered planks. A few more well-placed kicks, and the metal hinge popped loose. There were two other pieces of metal left behind, but they'd either rusted to a fine powder years ago or bent too easily. Megan picked up the hinge and pulled out the remaining nails and slivers of wood that clung to it. The hinge mostly formed a decorative piece, however, one end tapered to a convenient point. Not sharp, but she didn't need it to be. Megan used the rough stones as a file and worked the piece of metal. With each pass, it took on a sharp blade-like edge. Maybe it would take on a sharp enough edge to cut flesh, sever an artery, or pierce a vital organ. In the distance, she heard what sounded like something heavy falling to the floor. Ignoring the commotion, she retreated behind the rock table, where she continued to work the metal. Maybe being hidden from sight would force anyone coming down the stairs to have... Maybe being hidden from sight would force anyone coming downstairs to have to enter the cell, which would give her a chance to escape. Okay, so that was Chapter 1 and Chapter 22. I'm going to do another video this week where I finish the book Reapoke. And then I'm going to move on and read, I think, we're going to read Crimson Tassels, I believe. And anyway, if you don't have a copy of Reapoke, you can order this on Amazon, or if you want, reach out to me directly at my email, which is Brian the Writer. That's Brian with a Y. Actually, I think I can even put it up on the screen for you so that you know where to go. And you can do a you can go to Brian the Writer at briannoack.com, and that way you will know how to get a hold of me. And what we can do is I can sign a copy and send it to you. There's a little bit of an added fee over the top of what I normally charge to handle the mail. I think I think my prices are currently $25 for a signed copy, and that covers shipping and the book. And I'll even throw in a little something extra. You get a bookmark to go along with it. So anyway, very much appreciate you spending time with me today. That was Chapter 21 and Chapter 22. See if I remember. Yes. The next one, the next video will finish the book Reapoke. I'm also working on a short story, which I'm intending to read here pretty soon. I've got it almost done, but that should be a lot of fun too. All right. Well, thanks for joining me again, and you guys have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Bye-bye.